All right, welcome everybody to a special edition of Inside the Coach's Office. We are live from Buffalo Wild Wings in Waterford. My name is Dan Murphy, and I'm here with my co-host Brian Barnes. Brian, what are we doing here? What do we got going on here today?
This is a fun day, Dan. You know, we're here to support our football program here at Waterford Kettering with the fundraiser. We got parents and players here, and it's an exciting day of football here in Michigan and really all over the country. It's the first. To me, this is still the first official day of NFL football. I know we had a game Thursday night and Friday night, but we're going to have a lot of fun today talking about, previewing the Packers and Lions today, talking a little bit about Michigan and Michigan State last night, and hopefully we get to some Tiger baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. So just an incredible time to be a Detroit sports fan right now. Everything's going. Football's going. Baseball's going. The Tigers are in a pennant chase. You can't ask for much more. I know for me personally, I got 3 TVs set up in my basement so I can watch everything. Last night I had Michigan going, Michigan State going, and the Tigers going. You just can't ask for much more as a Detroit sports fan right now, Brian.
How cool is it that for the third year in a row, we have serious expectations for our NFL team? You know, that had, like, legit Super Bowl aspirations, not just make the playoffs. Like, that's pretty awesome. And then you mentioned the Tigers, they're going to be a playoff team. They're a World Series contender. And then, Michigan and Michigan State, they're still going to be in the running for Big Ten championship. Really, I think more so Michigan, but we could talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, what an exciting time. And it doesn't always happen like this for us as Michigan sport fans, but it's pretty cool.
No, we definitely had a drought as Detroit sports fans for quite a while. The teams were down. The Tigers were in a rough spot. The Lions, everybody knows how rough it was for so long for them. But I always thought, during that time, I'm like, there's going to be a time. Like, they're all down right now. But there's going to be a time they might all turn it around at the same time. And if that happens, it could be some of the funnest times we've ever had.
Yeah, you're right. It is a lot of fun. And with that, it's very hard to be bad for a very long time in professional sports. Like, the way the game is set up, the sports, it's very hard to be bad for so long. So you are right there. And it's pretty awesome. It's taken the city by hold and the area by hold. And, then in a month, we're going to start Piston basketball again, see if they can, go deeper into the playoffs. And hopefully the Red Wings, I remember for the long time, it was really Red Wings and everybody else in this town. And now we're waiting for the Red Wings to catch up, and become that playoff team as well. So, again, fall in Michigan right now is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into what happened last night. Kind of the appetizer of the weekend, but a pretty awesome night. Like I said, I was trying to watch all 3 at the same time. But we're getting into the marquee matchup it was last night, and that's Michigan and Oklahoma. Oklahoma comes out with the win 24-13, and as a Michigan fan, I was hopeful we would see more from Michigan's offense. The new offense coordinator Chip Lindsey, the true freshman phenom, and Bryce Underwood, but the expectation should have been what we saw. You have a true freshman quarterback, his first start on the road, a big-time matchup, new offensive coordinator, new offense, so many new guys, and they struggled. They really struggled against Will Venables and that Oklahoma defense. And, just going over some of the numbers, Bryce Underwood, 9 for 24, 142 yards. A lot of issues, man. A lot of miscommunication. You saw that, kind of went viral, his little blow-up on the sideline with Justin Haynes. Man, what did you think watching Bryce Underwood in Michigan last night, Ryan?
So obviously, all the hype and all the conversations today are about Bryce Underwood, right? For good reason, right? He got paid a lot of money as an 18-year-old freshman, right? He's not in high school anymore, and now it's not where before a lot of people were sometimes defensive. That's an 18-year-old kid and he's going to have his struggles, but now that he's making what he's making, unfortunately, this is the time period we live in with college sports. Like, he's going to be, people are going to be critical of him, every game if he's not just dominating. And so before I get to his performance, the one thing that stood out to me was I was kind of surprised how physical Oklahoma was on both sides of the ball. Like, their defense was hitting and they were getting after it. And even on the offensive side of the ball, they ran the ball really well. That surprised me. Maybe not that a Will Venables team wasn't going to be hard-hitting and ready to go, but maybe I don't know if Michigan responded to that level of physicality. I didn't feel that during the game. And also watching it, I felt that Oklahoma was in control the entire time. I guess I didn't expect that. I don't know if I expected Michigan to win, but I don't think I expected Oklahoma to be in charge the whole time. And then going back to Bryce Underwood and how schematically they worked with them, I felt like they were calling their plays and calling the game script like he was an 18-year-old freshman quarterback playing in his first road game period, and it happens to be in Norman, Oklahoma. I just kind of felt that, there was a lot of criticism about not a lot of downfield throws and things like that. But, Michigan historically, at least in the last few years, has relied heavily on its run game anyway. And so even with the new offensive coordinator, Chip Lindley, I still kind of felt like they were protecting Bryce a little bit in that regard. And no, he didn't play great. And you're right, the sideline blow up is noticeable, and we'll get headlines when he's not successful on the field. But he's going to have his growing pains, as good as he is. And I've heard some people say, some experts, so to speak, that he's potentially, the LeBron James of college football. And again, that's putting a lot on a kid who has the physical tools, but there's a lot of dudes out there on the other side of the ball as well who, are 4- and 5-star guys that can play. And, they're getting schemed up defensively as well to stop what he does. So ultimately, like, the tools are there. But I think Michigan fans have a right to be a little bit, I don't want to say concerned, but maybe disappointed. Maybe they were looking, a little more optimistic last night than what actually happened.
Yeah, I agree. I think it stood out to me the most was just how many times they would run a flash fake or a play action, and Underwood would go the wrong way. It was at least 10 times, honest to God. It was insane how many times he would step the wrong way, and it doesn't do anything for you. If you flash fake or play action, you go the wrong way, the defense isn't gonna fall for it, obviously, and it kind of just throws off the rhythm of everything. I thought that was kind of alarming, but it just kind of showed you, like, oh man, the kid just turned 18 a couple weeks ago. Like, there's just so much expectations on him. It was going to be growing pains. Like I said, I was hopeful, like he would just, just drum on the ground around him, but it hasn't worked out, and that should have been expected. It should have been expected by all Michigan fans that this is going to be a process, and he's going to be a superstar. You can see the talent. You can see the size and the athletic ability that he has. It's just going to take time. And I would add, I was surprised that they haven't had more design runs for him. I know he's, like I said, he's 18, but man, he's got the size and the athletic ability to make things happen with his speed. I'm surprised they haven't had more designed runs for him.
Yeah, that'll be something to see, down the road if that's something they adjust to, and maybe wanting to get him more touches like that, maybe a little bit more diverse. And again, you're right. Who knows how much of their scheme they even have in right now for him, right? Again, 18 years old, hasn't been on campus very long. Who knows, right? That might be something that they're planning on down the road, and they were hoping they could get away with the other night. But there was a time in college football where freshmen weren't even allowed to play.
No, it's rare. It's rare to have a true freshman start.
Yeah, and so especially, like, I go back to it. The most important position in sports is quarterback, and you'll never convince me otherwise. And so a freshman starting at the most important position. A lot of expectations on him. Probably unfair. To a degree, but like you said, growing pains. And I'm curious, from a Michigan fan perspective, what were the expectations from a win total wise at the end of the season? Knowing they've lost a lot over the years, they're still talented, obviously. Justice Hayes is a really good running back. He's fun to watch. He runs hard and he's fast. But I'm curious at the end of the year if this changes their mindset about what the win total is going to be at the end of the year. Like, what's deemed a successful season? Is it still, no, we have the talent to win the Big Ten or go to a New Year's Day bowl game or make the college football playoff? I know I'm still not used to saying that. Or is it still, we're young, he's young, he's going to develop. Even if we get to 7-8 wins, it's great because then next year he's back and everything's okay. But the weird thing about college football is there's no guarantees that guys are going to be back.
Yeah.
That's the insane part, is that if he were to stay 4 years and develop, like, you're right, he could turn into, a top 5 pick. Just physically, he has that ability, but right, who knows? So I'm curious what everybody's thoughts are now after seeing him perform 2 games into his college career.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get into is, kind of Michigan's expectations and kind of where we see and what would be considered a successful season for Michigan this year. My thought process was 9 wins. If they could get to 9 wins and the offense and specifically Bryce Underwood develops and you see a lot of, improvement throughout the season, I would consider that successful, even if that's not a playoff appearance, which I wouldn't think it would be at 9 wins. I guess it kind of depends the wins and losses and where other teams fall, but I wouldn't think 9 wins would get you in. but just progression throughout the season. And I expected them to lose to Oklahoma, and I kind of expected exactly what we saw, to be honest. One thing you can say, there was no turnovers. I mean, there was just a lot of missed throws on miscommunications, but at least he protected the football. You can give him that. But we're going to see. I mean, the next 2 weeks are really odd because Sharon Moore can't coach. As part of the suspension, the head coach Sharon Moore is suspended for the next 2 weeks. And oddly enough, I mean, when Harbaugh was suspended a couple years ago during the championship run, he could still be coach practice throughout the week. He just couldn't be there for the game. Sharon Moore can't be in the building, which is wild. So you're coming off a loss. You got a young quarterback you're trying to develop, and he can't be around for 2 weeks. So I'm interested in your thoughts, Brian. Like, obviously, you've never been in a situation like this as a head coach where you can't be in the building for 2 weeks.
No.
How would you handle this, you think, as a head coach, and how would you let your staff know, like, hey, this is how we're going to run things and how we want our young quarterback to develop?
Not to be a troll, but I have some fun on all sides of the Michigan State, Ohio State rivalry. Michigan fans will tell you they did nothing wrong, but by the way, your head coach isn't, after coming off a loss, isn't going to be around for 2 weeks. But hey, that's another story. We could have fun with that. But obviously those guys, they've known about the suspension for a while, and so they, have taken steps to make sure they have a plan on who's going to lead practices, how are you going to develop practices, things of that nature for those next 2 weeks. But anything that came from last night, you better believe today, like they're taking those, they're taking what happened last night into account as well when it comes to practice for the next 2 weeks. And so they were pretty banged up. And I heard, Steve Dace say from Michigan podcast, like he's heard, he was saying like either guys are not going to play next week or they're going to be really limited against Central Michigan. And, obviously I think they should beat Central Michigan anyway, but they're pretty beat up. And that was a physical game last night. And then the following week they go to Nebraska. So that game has gotten pretty big now. Huge. It's gotten pretty big now because you've lost a non-league game on the road, which isn't the end of the world. But now you're going on the road to what's going to be an improved Nebraska team. Because Matt Rule is a good coach. Historically, he's turned around programs and done good things. They're going to be ready, and that's going to be another tough environment for Bryce Underwood to go to, like we mentioned. So you hire your staff for a reason. They've got some quality guys. They've got guys that have coached in the NFL. They've got guys that have coached in college for a long time. So I'm not worried about that aspect necessarily. And they probably have guys on their staff that want to be a college coach one day, and are going to take on those traits, for the next 2 weeks as well. But it's definitely it's wild, and it's exacerbated by the loss last night.
Yeah, I would assume probably Martindale take over as the head coach, take a lot of the head coaching things over the next couple of weeks with all his experience.
You would think that would make sense, I think, but I don't know how much history he has in the college game, so to speak. Yeah. So there's some truth to that as well. But like I said, I'm sure they've talked about it and figured it out, and here's how it's going to work months ago, right? And then, but again, now we have to take into account what happened last night, and that as well. So definitely a challenge, for this. Definitely a challenge for that staff.
And just going back to that Nebraska game, that was a game I definitely circled because a lot of pundits are picking Nebraska to be kind of that fourth team to get in the playoffs from the Big Ten. And, I think Michigan's right on the fringe of being one of those teams considered to make the playoffs as well. So I could see the winner of that game being the team that kind of gets that last spot for the Big Ten.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And, going back to it, other seasons, losing early on a non-league game could take you out of the national championship race, right? And obviously that doesn't happen anymore. So Michigan's not done by any means. Like this could still turn out to be a great season. And like you said, typically teams, you want your teams better at the end of the season than they are at the beginning. And they'll get better every week, and Bryce Underwood will get better every week, and those players will get better every week. So I am, like you said earlier, what are the expectations now for a win total, and these next 2 weeks are critical for the rest of this. I think, the next 2 weeks are more critical for the season than the game against Oklahoma, even though everybody circled that. That's a big time college football game against two great programs. The next 2 weeks are the most critical.
I really said the 4 games you're circling right now are at Nebraska, at USC, at Michigan State, which we're going to get into in a minute, and then the final game against Ohio State. So if you can you're basically going to have to win 3 out of those 4 to make a playoffs. You split those, go 2 out of 4, you win 9 games. I would say that's a pretty good season, and especially if we see Underwood in the offense develop throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree. Nine wins, I think, would be a pretty solid season. You'd feel good going into the off season and the postseason, and then going into next year.
But yeah, definitely the Nebraska game in 2 weeks. If Michigan can't come out with a win or don't look very good in that game, it could get a little dicey this season.
Yeah, like going really quick, Dave. Like I'm going to ask you directly because you grew up more of a Michigan fan than me. Like, what specifically would you like to see in the next 2 weeks? Like, is it Bryce Underwood go 23 for 28, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns? Like, do you want to see more, like I said, diversity in the play calling and the scheme? And again, maybe all their scheme isn't in yet necessarily. Defensively, because it wasn't like, Oklahoma could have, I felt like watching that game, the final was 24-13, but I felt like it could have been, they could have been in the 30s.
Yeah.
So what specifically do you want to see in the next 2 weeks?
Like I mentioned earlier, I would like to see Underwood a lot more involved in the run game, because I just think that opens up so much more for you as an offense when the quarterback is a threat to run the football. And if they can get him more involved, I think that opens up the pass game a little bit more. It forces defenses to bring another defender into the box. It could give you some more one-on-one opportunities and maybe make the passing a little bit easier for him. So I would say that would be the biggest thing, just from a scheme perspective, that I would like to see more. Just Underwood more involved in the run game.
So if people that listen to us and know us, they know we're a big fan of the quarterback carrying the ball. Anyway, this is something to think about, though. There was historically in the NFL, the belief that owners didn't want to draft spread quarterbacks, true spread running quarterbacks, is because owners were hesitant to invest that much money in that position for that player getting hurt. So think about RG3, right? And think about other times. And now, now that's kind of gone away a little bit. Lamar Jackson's a dude, Jalen Hurts is a dude, things like that. But do you ever wonder, I wonder if anybody takes into account now, you've got your 18-year-old, $10 million phenom, if like, hey, we're not going to run him that much and get.
I would say, look at what happened last night with Mateer, Oklahoma. I'm not saying run him as much as Mateer ran last night.
I agree.
Almost like 20 carries. He was getting popped.
I don't think
times. I'm not saying that, but at least a little bit more. Some happy medium between the two of what Michigan was doing and what Oklahoma was doing, because they went out. Oklahoma went out and paid big money for Mateer as a transfer out of the portal, and they ran him to death.
Sure. I'm not sure he's making the 10 mil number that Bryce is. And so I wonder.
What are you paying the $10 million for? You're paying the $10 million for to get the full total package and to win football games.
I agree. I'm just curious. I don't know. And this is conspiracy theory. I wonder if those thoughts ever crossed anybody's mind.
Right? It shouldn't, though, because you brought him in to get everything out of him. And part of his game is being able to run the football with his physicality and his athleticism. And if you're not going to do that, I just think you're limiting him and you're limiting the offense.
You do. And that's something, we could talk about this all day, but with the NIL or, whatever you want to call it nowadays, like how much say does the quarterback or the player have in what he's doing? Right? Like, what if Bryce Underwood and his handlers or his family members, whatever, are like, yeah, I plan on being the number 1 pick. I'm not carrying the ball. Yeah, and I'm not just, and that's not fair. I don't mean to pile on him, but you could say that about a lot of players that are now making money. How much do they want to do? How much? Hey, we're going live in practice today. Yeah, I don't know. Not me today. I'm a little banged up. I'm going to sit this one out. You wonder now. I'm not against players, having their control and that sort of thing, but I wonder now how that changes everything.
Yeah, and that's another topic we'll have to get into down the road or another podcast. But just the money being involved, it can bring in so many different issues. And college football is just different. It's different now than it's been. But just to sum it up, I'd just love to see Underwood more involved in the run game, and we'll see where this offense goes going forward. But again, Michigan falls 24-13 to Oklahoma and falls to 1-1 in the season. So another game that was completely opposite locally. Michigan State 42, Boston College 40, in an absolute thriller, absolute shootout. Aiden Childs, incredible, both with his arm and his leg. 4 touchdown passes, another touchdown running, 231 yards passing, 39 yards rushing. He just looked fantastic, man. I mean, every bit that I think Michigan State's fans hoped they would get out of Childs this year, I mean, you saw it last night.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And, overall, like you hear sometimes pundits and the people on the TV say, they need that program win. I kind of felt for Jonathan Smith that was a program win. And when Boston College took the lead in the second overtime, I was kind of like, wow, this is a bad loss. Like it's, Boston College is going to be, middle of the attack, middle of the pack, maybe first tier ACC team, right? But Bill O'Brien's a fantastic coach. So that is a game I'm like, God, if you want to be legit, you have to beat Boston College at home. I mean, there's just no doubts about it. Even though Luca Lombardo, the quarterback at Boston College, and some of those receivers had a day. Like those guys were really good, and Bill O'Brien knows how to coach offense. But just kind of felt that needed to be a program win for overall for Michigan State, and good for them. They have some dudes, like underrated dudes, like Aiden Childs. They talked on the broadcast. He's not even 20 years old yet either. He's a young guy as well. And then Nick Marsh is a dude. He's a man, and who knows how much longer he's there. Like he's the real deal. So good program win. And like I said, years past, when Michigan State has been struggling, even when I was a kid, all right, you felt like those type of games when they could go either way, they would not necessarily come on top. And that happened a little bit even at the end of the Mark D'Antonio era. There were some games where they lost where you're like, how in the world did they lose that game? So, props for them. Good for them. A good, decent non-conference game. It was a perfect time for them where they're in their program. And now their schedule, you think lightens up a little bit. They're hosting Youngstown State, which is a big one. So they could be 3-0 going out to USC, and then they follow that game at Nebraska. So things definitely don't get any easier. Like those are tough ones. If they can split one of those before coming back home for UCLA, they can feel pretty good. I think again, what Michigan State's expectations are before the season. You wanted to see year 2, Jonathan Smith, like definitely take a next step. Last year, getting your feet wet in the program and getting your guys in and a little bit of a struggle. But this year, I think they fully expect to make a bowl game. If it's not a bowl game, it's not a good year. It's not a good year. It's just not. And so, credit to them. And he mentioned afterward, like it was a great football game. That was a fun football game.
It was great.
Unless you're a defensive guy or who's 17-14, which are also sometimes fun to watch. That was a pretty cool game. There was, it wasn't perfect. There were some turnovers and drops, but it was a fun game.
Yeah, definitely. Between the two local games that were big nationally, and it was pretty cool to have Michigan was on ABC primetime and Michigan State was on NBC primetime at the same time. And vastly two different games. I mean, unbelievable. So Michigan State game was definitely a lot more entertaining to watch, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and Dan, like I'm for our Michigan fan, like I am not saying Michigan State is a better football team pound for pound than Michigan. And I know Oklahoma is vastly different and better than Boston College. But you could argue Michigan State played better last night, right? They looked
on one side of the ball.
I mean, definitely on the one side of the ball. Yeah, like they, again though, year 2 with Aiden Childs, they were really Jonathan Smith. It's really his third year with Aiden Childs, right? Because he had him at Oregon State, before he transferred to Michigan State. But yeah, they definitely were a little more diverse offensively than Michigan was.
That was what I noticed the most. As I'm watching both games, I'm watching Underwood. I'm like, the miscommunications. He's not really involved in the run game. Maybe not escaping as much as maybe he could have at times. And then I'm watching Aiden Childs, and I'm like, he's 3 years in. He's the second year at Michigan State in that offense. Second year as a starter with Michigan State. You could just see the comfort level with both himself and within the offense with his receivers and the play calling, and just how involved he was. And when the pocket would break down, he would escape and create time for himself to get the ball downfield. If there still wasn't anything going down the field, he would run for a first down. And I'm thinking, man, this is what I want to see from Underwood going forward. Yeah. So it was very interesting to watch kind of the two go on at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like Michigan State's offense is kind of where Michigan wants to kind of get to.
Yeah, and I think they will. And, neither quarterback, in my opinion, is really a fantastic, great, accurate downfield thrower. Like, I don't think that's their skill set, right? But you're right. Aiden Childs was able to create some positive plays, which really there was nothing there. And the other cool thing is at times, you're going to need your quarterback to win a game for you. And that last night, I kind of felt like Aiden Childs won that for Michigan State.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. He was the best player on that field But I got to give a shout out to Dylan Lonergan from Boston College. 390 yards, 4 touchdowns. Brian, you mentioned Bill O'Brien, the coach for Boston College. You could see that offense, man. That passing game was incredible. Obviously, Bill O'Brien, coached under Nick Saban at Alabama, coached under Bill Belichick at the Patriots. Just a tremendous offensive mind, and you could see that on display for Boston College.
I always wonder, and I've wondered this for a long time, why certain college football programs aren't as successful as the others, and there's always those that have more resources than the others, or they put more emphasis on it. And I always wondered why Boston College. It's a great university. I know the New England area really is a pro sports area more than anything, right? The Patriots and the Bruins and the Red Sox, the Celtics and stuff. But Bill O'Brien, I think he could do some things there. Like, you have a pro coach who's developed quarterbacks, who's coached Tom Brady in the NFL to some of his most successful years. He's going to be able to recruit guys to go there. Like, Boston's a great town. They're a program to me that's always underrated, or has that ability to get good really quick. And so this is his second year already. And last year they were 7-6, I think, in a bowl team. There's no reason why Boston College and Bill O'Brien can't be successful in the ACC.
And I wonder what Bill O'Brien's goals are at this point. I assume he took Boston College because he does have ties to the New England area, being a offense coordinator at the Patriots for a long time. I wonder if that's where he's comfortable and that's where his family's comfortable. Could he be there for a long time, or is this just a stopgap where he's going to use this to get back into the NFL? Because, like you said, I think he could build the juggernaut at Boston College. The ACC is not the toughest conference in the world, so some teams are starting to bounce back. Florida State's bouncing back a little bit, but overall, the depth of the conference really isn't there, and he could build a pretty strong program at Boston College.
Yeah, Clemson made themselves nationally relevant in that conference. Like, it can be done, because there's always the questions about can you have national success in that conference when the SEC and the Big Ten are still doing their thing, right? Clemson proved that you can. Miami, maybe now, or they did historically, and maybe now they can get back to that. So I'm with you. I don't see why not. But yeah, you never know coaching, with coaches where he's at with everything. Like, he's been a lot of different places. He's been a pro head coach, had some success with Houston, not as the GM of Houston, but he's had some success there, division winners, playoff teams, and then obviously as a coordinator and at Penn State. But you're right. Maybe he felt, he did leave Penn State probably before I think people expected him to, and then everybody thought, like, no, he's just an NFL guy, and that's why he went there. And then, he's back at BC. So that's a good question. But he will be successful at Boston College before his next step.
Yeah, I agree. And I would not be surprised to see Boston College knock off maybe 1 or 2 upsets in the ACC. So I would say those juggernaut teams that are there, Florida State, Miami, Clemson. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't have the schedule in front of me who Boston College plays, but I would watch out. If you're one of those big time teams in the ACC, I would watch out for Boston College for sneaking up on you, because that offense was definitely explosive, especially that passing game. But,
you're right, and going back to Michigan State a little bit, and you mentioned Boston College. You're not going to be surprised if they pull off an upset or win a game maybe they shouldn't on paper, but. College football teams and NFL teams, but I think it's more so in college, they're a different team later on in the season than they are now. We just talked about how Michigan's beat up a little bit, and other teams will get beat up, and they'll be different. Your team week 1, 2, and 3 will be vastly different than your teams, 9, 10, and 11 down the road. So, but they theoretically, potentially, like, they have the ability to pull off some upsets. And are they a sleeper team to get to the playoff? They were 7 wins last year.
They kind of needed this one, I think.
You're right. They've got Clemson's on their schedule, Notre Dame's on their schedule, SMU's on their schedule. They still have some tough games ahead. So, and now, they just came to East Lansing, and now they got to go out to Stanford and play Stanford, California. So that's not an easy turnaround as well. So,
that classic ACC matchup, Boston College, Stanford.
I'm still not. I'm not comfortable with any of it. I don't like any of it anymore. I saw a neat little episode. Somebody had a cool little YouTube, talk about their USC Notre Dame rivalry. And I grew up, and that was a real cool rivalry. But that rivalry, in the coming years might be done. for different various reasons, right? And USC's being in the Big Ten. So really what needs to happen is Notre Dame just needs to join the Big Ten.
Well, we've been saying that for decades.
And there's no issues, and all those rivalries are still there that they might have trouble scheduling now.
But yeah, just thinking of that Boston Stanford ACC matchup. For those that don't know, Brian and I host a podcast called the College Football Retro Show, where we go back and look back at old games from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, kind of do a deep dive on the games. And one of the common themes that we always say, well, it used to be better. It used to be better back then because these things were normal. You don't have a team on the West Coast playing the Atlantic Coast Conference. It just so many things in college football game just doesn't make sense. As much as we still love the game and we enjoy watching the games, but man, there is something about what it used to be, and it's a different game now. No question about it. It's different. But just to wrap up this Michigan State talk, Michigan State again wins 42-40, double overtime. Absolute thrill every game. If you didn't see it, try to get on YouTube, watch the highlights because just a really great college football game last night and in the East Lands. And so we're going to change topics here a little bit. We're going to get into the Tigers now. Brian, we're going to talk about our confidence level in the Tigers. Obviously, right now they're sitting in the 2 spot in the American League, kind of battling it out with the Blue Jays for number 1 overall seed. But they've had this incredible division lead for so long now, a double-digit lead for the most of the season. It kind of feels a little bit like they've been coasting for a while. Last night we did see, vintage Turf Scuba, lights out and a 6-0 win. But Friday night, Flaherty gets lit up, and the pitching staff kind of gets lit up, and they lose that game to the White Sox. And it's just been kind of this up and down, pretty much for a long time now. So I'm curious, Brian, kind of where is your confidence level in the Detroit Tigers right now as we're in early September here?
So confidence level is still fairly high. I'm like any other fan, though, who gets frustrated and gets concerned when they go through those lulls that every team's going to go through. And again, it's amazing as a fan how much things change and perspective changes from one year to the next. Just a little over a year ago, like the Tigers sold at the deadline, and now a little over a year later, we're worried that having 92 or 93 wins isn't good enough, right? Or we're concerned what they're going to do in the playoffs with that many wins. That's just pretty wild. So, yeah, of course they're flawed. Every team is flawed. But I go, with the new age of baseball, the money ball and the analytics and things like that, like they're really, not as glaring as you think. And here's what I'm saying by that. Like, they're not going to have a 300 hitter. For me, growing up, like that was like the epitome of like, man, you're a great hitter if you're hitting 300. They're not going to have a 300 hitter. They'll only have Riley Green might be your only 30 home run, 100 RBI guy. I don't think Kerry Carpenter's close with the RBIs. I don't think Spencer Torkelson's close with the RBIs, which again, was another barometer for me and how good you were. They strike out a lot, right? They do. Riley Green strikes out a lot, and they strike out a lot, but in today's day and age in baseball, none of that seems to matter anymore. You know what I mean? And so getting to the playoffs is the thing. And then AJ Hinch, as we know, does a fantastic job playing matchups and managing the game and the pitching staff. And so I look at it like this, and I know you mentioned Tarek Skubal was back to doing Tarek Skubal things, and Jack Flaherty didn't pitch well the other day. But if it's Tarek Skubal and then chaos, so be it, because it's the playoffs, and it doesn't matter how it looks. You are doing everything you can to win a series, and as long as they can get that series win, however he wants to patch and grab and do whatever, fine. And the other thing that I hold my hat on is this: like they're on a 90-some win pace, right? And they really haven't gotten next to nothing from Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling. And Parker Meadows was a big part of what they did last year defensively, with his ability to get on base, steal bases. Like, that's very underrated in my opinion. And so, yes, the pitching staff right now is a little patched up because losing Reese Olson and Jackson Joe might come back to bite him in the butt a little bit, obviously, and not maybe going to get more pitching at the deadline. But they've had some guys – that they acquired actually haven't done really well. So I'm still pretty high on the Tigers. Maybe that's the homer in me, but again, look at the Yankees and where they're at. They're they're going to be a playoff team, they strike out a lot. They don't pitch great. You know, they don't have a lot of 300 hitting guys. You know what I'm saying? And so that's just the way the game is played now. And so it's not ideal, right? But situational hitting is something as well. They got a lot of that last year in the playoffs as well, and toward the end of the season. So I'm still feeling pretty good. So, Dan, I don't know if I just talked you off the ledge a little bit. But
No, I'm not on the ledge. I just – it is a little concerning because you mentioned pitching chaos and how they used it last year. And last year was just a magic carpet ride of a run. Like, we may never see that again in our lifetime, and how they were bringing guys up from the minors who had like 5 and 6 ERAs at Toledo. And then they bring them up and they're lights out every time they bring them in. And it felt like every time Hinch would bring a guy in, it just worked time after time after time. Every pinch hitter would come up and get a key hit. It was unbelievable. And like I said, it was just a kind of a magic run. And I'm watching the team, and you could tell like these next 19 to 20 games that are left here, you can tell that's what they're building towards. They're building for Skubal and pitching chaos. They're trying to figure out who is going to be involved in that pitching chaos in that group. And guys got to step up. Guys got to stand out. And if I look at a few, you know, obviously Will Vest at the back end of the bullpen has been fantastic. He had a little bit of a slow spot at mid-year, but he's bounced back from that and been fantastic. Really, for him, what's interesting is he's a ninth inning guy. Like, if you put him in the 8th or the 7th, it gets rough. You can look at his stats throughout the season and kind of throughout his career. But ninth inning, he is absolutely lights out. So he's kind of solidified the ninth inning and kind of the true closer spot. Finnegan was a fantastic pickup. Unfortunately, he's got a little bit of a muscle strain. He's going to be out a couple weeks. The hope is he's going to be back the last week of the season, kind of work off the rust to get ready for the postseason. But you never know with something like that, man. They can flare up again. And so the hope is, though, he'll be back in a couple weeks and be raring to go. Because if he can, he hasn't given up an earned run since he's come here. Absolutely fantastic. Tyler Holt.
Did you expect Charlie Morton to pitch as well as he has when the Tigers acquired him too?
He's been rough, man, lately.
He has been rough lately.
Like, I don't know about him. Like, he started off, his first few games were pretty good, but, man, he's fallen off the last few games. His ERA is over 5 since he's been with the Tigers. Flaherty is so unpredictable. He can be absolutely lights out, and then he can be just giving up home run after home run. You don't know what you're going to get from him. And that's the thing. Like, you got a couple relievers that you feel pretty good about. You obviously feel incredibly confident in Skubal. But after that, I don't know if you can have the same confidence level in the rest of these guys as you did last season going into the playoffs, because there've just been so many times where it's been incredibly inconsistent with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, you're not wrong, but I still go to the results. You know, looking at their standings now and their projected win totals right at 92 games, you know, which is more than a year ago. And every other team in the American League other than Toronto, you know, is projected to have less wins than that 92. Again, you know what I mean? It's yes, they're not perfect, and sometimes in a way it kind of feels like when the Lions backed into the playoffs at 8-8, you know, and go to win. Right?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't say that, Brian. I think a lot of it is they're kind of locked in that 2 spot. Maybe they're competing a little bit with Toronto for that 1 spot. But it really doesn't matter that much. The difference between 1 and 2 is if the Tigers and Blue Jays play in the ALCS, Toronto will get the game 7 at home if it gets there. That's the only difference. The difference between 2 and 3, though, in terms of positioning, is huge. No doubt. And right now the Tigers have a 4-game lead, I believe, right now with Houston right now. But they also have the tiebreaker, the head-to-head tiebreaker with Houston, which could come out to be huge. So if the Tigers can finish second compared to third, they get that first round bye and they get the second round at home. Compared to if they end up in the 3rd spot, you're talking about playing a first round 3-game series. Now, they would have that 3-game series at home, but man, as we saw what the Tigers did against Houston last year, they went into Houston and took the first 2 games, and that was it. Houston's season was over, just like that, in a blink of an eye. So you want to do everything you can to avoid playing in that first round 3-game series and get that bye week. So I think the Tigers have been kind of in this weird spot where they're really comfortable.
Yeah,
you have such a huge lead in the division. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion of when this thing's going to close up. They have I think 8.5-game lead on Kansas City right now, somewhere in that range. But they also have the tiebreaker with Kansas City if we're to come down to that. So the division is pretty much locked up. It's just a question of when. The real question is, you know, can they get that 2 seed? And they've had a comfortable 4-game lead in that for a long time. So I think a little bit of it is they're kind of going through the motions a little bit. They're kind of stuck in this 2 spot. And at some point, though, Like as we get closer, an inch closer to the playoffs, I mean, you want to see him ramp it up and get some consistency and get a little bit of a run and get hot going into the playoffs.
Yeah, in 2006, they got swept the last series of the year at home to the Royals, right, and blew the division lead that the Twins ended up winning. People forget that. And the Tigers lost the first game of the playoffs, game 1 at New York, and made it to the World Series. So, like, there is some truth to everything that's said about getting hot and playing well, but ultimately, I don't think it really does. It's all about the starting pitching, and it is all about the pitching and how A.J. Hinch handles that. And I think there's no question for the last month, 2 months, they've been coasting. Even when they were slumping, they went through that stretch of losing, 11 out of 12 or something like that. They still, their division lead didn't get low enough where you were concerned. And then on top of that, because of the additional wild cards, you never felt like they were threatened and not going to be a playoff team, right? And so I think there is a lot of that. Like baseball is a grind. You're getting into the dog days now. They're coming up on just about 20 games left or less than 20 games. They know what's ahead of them. Like in a perfect world, we could just skip ahead to the playoffs right now and just go, because that's where I think their mindset is. Yeah. And maybe A.J. Hinch is managing his roster these last 20 games or so with that in mind, thinking of matchups and who he's playing.
A little bit of that and trying to figure out who this pitching chaos staff is going to be. Guys are trying to earn a spot on the playoff roster right now.
No doubt. I'm curious, too, if, who else – is there anybody else from Toledo that is still theoretically, potentially could be on the 40-man roster or playoff time, on the playoff roster? I'm going to go back and look really quick.
I guess the guy that's out there right now that hasn't been on the team is Vierling.
Vierling definitely is one. I'm thinking more pitchers, but but again, Vierling and Parker Meadows. They haven't gotten much from.
But Meadows came back Friday night, and his first at bat back hits a home run, and then he also had a diving catch later in the game. I'm like, okay, can we get the Meadows that we saw in September in the playoffs last year? Because if we do, that's a total wild card and total game changer for them.
Yeah, he didn't have a spring training. His spring training was completely wiped out, and that's tough. So yes, I'm expecting big things out of him. So, Bo Brisky is currently, granted he's banged up. I don't know if he's returning.
I thought maybe like a month ago, maybe he's a guy to keep an eye on, but I don't think so.
Is Kiter Montero?
They brought Montero up. He got hit a little bit around the other night.
Is he though? It's different.
He's competing. He's on the roster. He's actually on the roster right now, competing for one of those spots.
He is, and your mindset as a pitcher and how you approach it is different when you're a starter compared to an elite reliever. When you're only going 1 or 2 innings, you're just bringing it. And you don't have to worry about longevity.
He is one of those guys that I think is better as a starter than he is coming out of the bullpen in the middle of the. He's one of those guys that could be a solid, if it's game 3, say it's game 4 in a 7-game series, he's your opener, goes one time through the lineup for you, and then you go pitching chaos with the rest of your bullpen. I could see him possibly being in one of those spots.
I'm with you. No, it's going to have to be. And I can see – I can see there at times, like you mentioned Jack Flaherty, maybe he's not one of your first 3. Casey Mize and Charlie Morton is your 2 and 3.
I think Casey Mize is starting. He struggled for a while, but his last start was pretty solid. 5 innings, 1 earned run. And I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to skip him once through the rotation here, because I went back. I talking on a podcast with one of our co-hosts and our buddies, Tom Murphy, my brother. We talking on a podcast before the season or early in the season. I said my concerns with this team are the starting rotations and the depth of the rotation, because very few of these guys you can trust to go through a full season. Jackson Jobe was the guy I brought up. Rookie season. What are you going to expect? You can't expect him to go throughout the year. Sure enough, the second month of the season, he goes down with the Tommy John. Reese Olson. Another guy who's never really gone through a full year in the majors. Boom. Gets hurt a few weeks ago. He's probably out for the rest of the year. They're talking maybe he could come back in the playoffs, but I don't foresee that. Flaherty, I talked about, man, that back could flare up at any time. Luckily, he hasn't had issues so much with the back, but it's just been his consistency. And then Casey Mize is another guy who's first year off the Tommy John last year. This was supposed to be his first really full year back would he hold up throughout an entire year? I was concerned maybe he's just getting a tired arm at some point. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they rest him one time through the rotation, or maybe limited his innings a little bit the rest of this month, just to give him a little bit of a rest.
Let me ask you though, Dan, who in the American League? Because here's the way I look at it, right? I heard on one of the local radio stations, they said, would you be more frustrated if the Tigers made the World Series and then you wish they did more at the deadline, right? Because you're going to be kicking yourself if you blow that opportunity, or if you make it, and you get knocked out in the first round. I look at it like this: like if you make it to the World Series, like, dude, you're in the World Series. Like crazy things happen in the game of baseball. Like, so that's great. Like, I don't regret. I wouldn't say regret anything. No, because you're in that situation, and then again, that's where great managers come into play, and then guys got to make plays. Like, great players, situational hitting is important. It's why Derek Jeter, the clutch gene, right? When you're in that moment, will the Tigers guys be able to have that situational hitting and make plays and situational pitching and make the plays enough to win? I still, there is nobody in the American League that scares me as a Tiger fan.
I agree.
There's nobody in the American League. And then the National League, obviously, the Brewers are good, and the Dodgers,
Phillies, yeah,
right? They're pretty good. But then again, you're in the World Series, right? And so that is you're in the World Series. Like, what else can you want as a fan, right? And then you mentioned this before, and I am curious about this. Like, we in one of our passing conversations over dinner or who knows what, but I wonder if Scott Harris and the Tigers front office thinks their World Series contending teams are still 2 and 3 years out. Right?
We're opening up a whole can of worms with this one. This is a whole another topic.
I know, but you think
I'm happy to go into it, though.
Yeah, you think about, why they didn't do what they did at the deadline. But you think about it, look at Scott Harris's draft history since being here. A lot of high school guys, a lot of young guys, right? He didn't take near ready or major league ready college guys. He took the younger high school guys thinking long term. So I'm wondering, and I'm thinking that even this year, like last year and this year is kind of still a surprise, but I think they're bona fide, hey, dynasty type. Back when they had Cabrera, Victor Martinez, Verlander type teams, right? That 10-year span where it's like they expect they're going to be there or they're going to be close every year. I wonder if that's still 1, 2, or 3 years out as opposed to now.
Man, this is a huge topic. Okay, so my theory at the deadline was that he's not. Why wouldn't he trade some guys? Some of his prospects. You have so many of the number 1 rated farm system. Why wouldn't he trade some of these guys to try to add to the current core to try to go win it all? And then it dawned on me, the current core is not anything what Scott Harris has built this team to be. No. You mentioned Riley Green. He might lead the league in strikeouts this year. I don't think he's a fan favorite. I don't think he's a long-term Tiger. I don't think so either.
I don't know how you extend a 24-year-old with bad legs already who strikes out a lot.
Well, yeah, the physical.
Who can't play center field.
One of the first things that we said, we talked about how much we loved it. He talked about on both sides of whether you're pitching or on offense, is own the strike zone, right? You want to limit strikeouts, make contact. Green is the complete opposite. He's an all or nothing guy. Torkelson, another 1-1 draft pick, right? He's not part of Harris's core, not somebody that he drafted. Another guy that's kind of an all or nothing guy, a lot of strikeouts. He got a ton of power, but strikeouts a ton. Doesn't make a ton of contact. These are guys that are part of the core that he didn't draft. The guys that he drafted are the Max Clarks, or the McGonagalls, the Brassinos, the Lorenzos. These are guys that he traded for or drafted. Those are the top prospects in the system. And is Harris thinking, I don't want to move any of these guys. I drafted these guys. I put my name behind these guys. I had my scouts that I hired go out and do the research on these guys. These are my guys. I'm not giving up these guys to add to a core that I don't believe in. And that's
he might not. He might
does
not.
believe in this core. And that's so crazy to say because they might go into the playoffs as the number 1 team in the American League in the number 1 spot with a team that he doesn't truly believe in. What a weird spot to be in as a GM.
You're right. It is weird. And look at it. Think about this too. Major League Baseball might be coming up to a situation where there's going to be a lockout or a strike again. Okay. I believe after 2026 season. So I think about that, and I think, gosh, there's no way they're re-signing Tarek Skubal.
No.
So
fans got to wrap their heads around that and accept that he's not going to be
He's
back.
not going to be a Tiger. So what does that? So what does that mean? Okay, should they have dealt him, or should they look into deal him this offseason? No, you can't, because baseball's fluky, and there's, like you just said, they theoretically they're going to have the first or second best record in the American League. Like, you can't trade the best pitcher on the planet right now. So that's going to be interesting, though. But I don't think Tarik Skubal is resigning. It's a business, and he said as much. And
he said it without saying it.
He said it without saying it. And next season is, I'm curious this too. You just said they didn't trade. They didn't want to trade all his prospects, or the top-rated prospects, for guys. Like, what does this offseason look like for the Tigers? Like, I don't think they're the same team next year. They can't be, obviously, right? So is it another frontline starting pitcher then, knowing that you're going to have a hard time resigning Skubal? You alleviate some of those guys who don't get on base a ton and strike out a lot, right? Is Kerry Carpenter a Tiger, right? As much as he's a fan favorite, and I like him a lot, but
I would just want to mention that, because I was thinking about that this morning with Kerry Carpenter. Okay, I was thinking about, man, what an awesome outfield is going to be with Riley Green, Parker Meadows, and Max Clark, all left-handed. Kerry Carpenter isn't a great defender, and he's also left-handed. Yeah. There's gonna be some major changes over the next year or two.
It has to be. Like, it's like we said, they're flawed. Every team is flawed. Like, are they good enough to win the World Series? I still think they could be. Like, I think they're good enough to get out of the American League. I think the National League, top to bottom, is just better, right? Like, the Tigers don't have a Bryce Harper. They don't have a Shohei Ohtani. You know what I'm saying? That high-level superstar. They do Skubal-wise, but other than that, they don't. And so it's going to be difficult when you play those National League teams.
Well, you got two superstars in my mind that have to carry and that's Skubal, obviously. You have to win every Skubal start in the playoffs. You just have to. And then the other superstar isn't a guy who actually plays, and that's AJ Hinch. He has to, with this roster, like you said, there's no superstars, specifically offensively, that can single-handedly carry you, or one or two guys that can carry you through a playoff series and win a playoff series for you. It's going to be AJ Hinch mixing and matching, pinch hitting with the pitching, obviously using pitching chaos and getting the matchups and getting outs when you need them. Like, he did it last year up until, like, they had a 2-1 lead on Cleveland, and they were, 5-6 outs away from going to the LCS. With a roster that I don't think is as good as this year's.
No, you're right. But like you said, you need those guys to do what they did a year ago, right? You need Andy Ibanez to have that big pitch hit double that he had in Houston a year ago, right, to win that series. So you need those sort of things to happen again. And again, that's why he's the manager of the Tigers, and he's one of the best there is, and he's won a World Series. And at the end of the day, too, like, we've talked about this a little bit. Would you rather be, the Tiger fan base that, had a 10-year stretch of, like, man, baseball's fun in this town, or do you want to be Kansas City, where they had a couple years and then it went bottom again, but they won a World Series? If you think of the Tigers playing the long game right now, and the Lions are in a similar situation, people I know are going to criticize them for, not signing Darius Smith, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But, what a fun time. This is fun. Like we mentioned when we started, like, this is still, like, we're playing, as they used to say, meaningful baseball games in September and October. And the Tigers are doing that. Like, what else, could you ask for as a fan?
And we can wrap this up here with the Tigers, but I wanted to mention the deadline real quick. Like, if they would have got Eugenio Suarez from the Diamondbacks, the third baseman, the big home run hitter, to combine with Finnegan and the other guys that they got, including Rafael Montero, who has really played pretty well, surprisingly. But if they had gotten Suarez out of that, would you say that was a successful deadline? Yeah, they're going for it. They're trying to win it all. They had gotten Suarez. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So yeah.
You would say that's a good deadline.
You would, of course.
Yeah, I think everybody would. Oh, yeah, man, they really went out and get it. Suarez is an OPS in the 500s.
Right.
Since the deadline.
Yeah.
Zach McKinstry has been a better overall player as a third baseman than Suarez has been.
Yeah.
So you just don't. You never know.
You never know.
You never know.
It's and if you're Seattle, like that, they went for it a little, obviously, right, getting him, but they're in danger.
They might slip out.
Yeah.
Slip out of the playoffs. Which is funny because Seattle and Texas, I felt, were two of the most aggressive teams in the American League. They both might not make the playoffs.
Crazy, yeah. So it's there's no guarantees. Obviously, there are no guarantees.
So talking about going all in, trying to win it all, led up to the main course here, the main event here, the Detroit Lions. Man, what a way to start off the year, Brian. Lions, Packers, 4:30. It's the key game of the day. It's the game everybody's looking at nationally, and obviously it is what we've all been looking for as Detroit sports fans. Is the beginning of the Lions season, and man, opening it with the Packers in Lambeau Field, and it's going to be exciting, man. I can't wait for it.
It is. I'm curious. I mean, I'm not curious. I know exactly what's going to happen. Is the majority of Lions fans will take the result today and sit on it and say, man, this is what's going to happen for the rest of the season. So let's say, for example, the Packers pull it out today and the Lions don't play very well, and they're you start questioning the new coordinators, and you wonder why the Lions didn't trade for Micah Parsons when their division rival did, or why they didn't just resign Zadarius Smith when he goes to the Eagles. I mean, it's going to be bad if today is a bad day for the Lions. And then conversely, if the Lions win, right, it's going to be, we trusted in Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell all along. There's no doubt the coordinators are awesome. So no matter what happens today, I have no doubt that it's going to be one or the other of those extremes.
I agree with you, but there is a lot of importance on this first game, though, because if the Lions can go in there and win this game, I've viewed even before the Micah Parsons trade that the Packers are going to be the most difficult team to get through to win the division for a third straight year. And to start off in Lambeau, like if you can get that road win, that division road win against a team that's probably going to be the one that's going to be the most difficult to get past, man, what a huge way to start the year, and what a huge advantage you're going to have after week one.
For sure, but obviously, those guys in the locker room and that coaching staff know that if it doesn't go their way today, they've got 16 more games to play. I'm not used to saying that, 17-game season, but they've got a lot of games left where I think fans will be the ones that'll say, see,
I agree with you.
You should have done this, or you should have get a different coordinator, you should have, or whatever, see, all that stuff. So that's where I'm thinking. That's where I'm thinking it's going to go.
Yeah,
but it is a bit.
Fans are going to be annoying one way or the other.
It's going to be annoying one way or the other. But again, how we talk about now how college football is, the NFL has been like this forever. Like this game, rivalry game, the result isn't going to derail your season.
No.
Right? And so they'll be fine.
Yeah. With that said, it definitely is a lot more important to Green Bay than it is Detroit, because it is Green Bay, a home game for Green Bay. They just went all in to get Micah Parsons. The Lions have been the team the last couple of years that the Green Bay hasn't been able to get past. I think it's a much more important game for Green Bay than it is Detroit, especially with it being in Green Bay.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that for sure. And, Jordan Love, they're, in Green Bay and their quarterback history, right? They're wondering if he's going to take the next step and that they take that mantle and be that guy. So I agree with that. And I do think it's important for the Lions on both sides of the ball. To say be successful is too simplistic. But what I'm saying is, I am curious how different their scheme is going to be. And here's what I mean. So with Aaron Glenn, you knew the Lions were like, hey, man, I'm bringing some pressure on third down. It doesn't matter. We're getting after it. And, we're going to play man. And sometimes
corners on islands.
Yeah. And some days, we're going to get home, and other days we're not. And then offensively, Ben Johnson with all his fireworks, and you knew what you were getting, the playmaking and all the fun looks and things like that. I'm curious how different they're going to be, if at all. So defensively, I do think they're going to change a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that caused problems last year, simply selling out all the time, because when you don't get home, their corners showed they weren't always great in man coverage, right? And a lot of games, especially when the injuries started to happen toward the end of the season, the offense was able to bail them out until the playoffs, right? And then offensively, I'm a Jared Goff fan. I believe he's a top 10 NFL quarterback, but I say that thinking there are 9 guys better than him, and that might be very controversial in this town. But I wonder how many times, if you were to ask Jared Goff to go win you a game, he could do it. And there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that could do that. So I'm curious. I wonder. I think this is going to happen with John Morton. I can see them relying on the running game even more than they did before. Obviously, Montgomery and Gibbs got their numbers, but I think it's even going to be more in their hands this year than it is Jared Goff. So, because obviously, like it's a sample of the playoff game against Washington, and everybody, my family gets mad at me for saying this, right? Oh, they had injuries, and if the defense was healthy, he'd be fine. But that's the most important position in sports. You can't turn the ball over that many times, throw a pick six, and fumble inside your own 20, and expect to overcome that and win a football game. And so that's where I think take the ball, help your quarterback a little bit, rely even more so on David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's what I was thinking with John Morton too. I think they're going to get back around to the football a little bit more than they have in the past, and that's what helps Goff. And my concern with the Lions more than anything is the interior offense. I think that is the position and the group that could derail this team if this team were to get derailed. It's because you have Zeitler go away in free agency, which is really, you look back on it now, you're like, oh man, right? Maybe you should have found a way, even if you had to overpay, to keep an all-pro guard on your team, because a few weeks later you have Ragnow retired. Now I know they kind of knew that could be coming down the line, but I'm wondering if it caught him off guard just a little bit, because I would think they would have tried a little bit harder to re-sign Zeitler if they knew Ragnow was going to retire. So you lose two all-pro interior offensive linemen in Ragnow and Zeitler, and you're going to replace them. Glasgow's going to go from guard to center, and originally you kind of wanted Glasgow to be kind of that sixth lineman, that backup, that depth. If you needed him, he comes in. You figure he's probably going to get playing time throughout the year, but you're not depending on him to be a starter. Well, now he enters, he has to be a starter. He has to play well. And originally you wanted him to be the guard, and you drafted Ratledge out of Georgia to be your starting center. And I thought, when I talked a lot about this, I'm like, starting center, as we know, like, I always, as an offensive line coach, I always like to have a center that has experience within that offense. You know, at the high school level, I always wanted to be a senior if possible, because they're going to come in there, they're going to be comfortable, they know their teammates, they know what the coaches want, they know the calls, they know everything, right, like the back of their hand. You asking a rookie to step in with the complex of what this offense is, and you expect him to know everything right off the bat, it didn't happen, right? It was barely a few days into the offseason, they made the switch. Boom, Glasgow goes to center, Ratledge goes to guard. And I thought right about it, I'm like, ooh, boy. Ooh, boy. We might have some issues here, because Glasgow really struggled last year. I know there was some reports that maybe he was playing a lot of the year injured. You know, I don't know how much I put into that. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But either way, he's another year older. And now you're going to have him and rely on him. And then you're relying on Ratledge as a rookie, and you're relying on Mahogany. He's only had a couple starts last year. He's going into a second year. So that's a lot of inexperience between Mahogany and Ratledge, and questionable on what quality you're going to get from Glasgow. And that's your interior offensive line. That's where your blitz pickup's going to be. That's where they're going to be sending all their different stuffs, all their different blitzes. And if there's questions along that offensive line, Goff's a sitting duck back there. He doesn't have the mobility to escape and create time. If there's guys coming right at him, that's a wrap.
You're right. And more so than any other position in football, that position is where you feel it the most when you don't have continuity as well. Yeah. So, like, you know, any sense that those guys are, you know, get banged up or get hurt, and you're changing guys in and out, that could cause some problems. So I think, you know, to your point earlier about, you know, the first game being a big game and overreactions and things like that, I think how they play as a unit might be just as important today as the outcome, right? Because you're going to get an idea long term of how those guys handle things. And the center position is so critical in the game of football, as you know, right? They're checking the protections a lot. They're IDing the middle linebacker for the run scheme and how they're fitting. And it's that important. It's basically another quarterback on the field. And to your point about the game, you know, just double checking the early part of the Lions schedule, and their schedule, as
brutal.
We know, is not. There's not a lot of cupcakes.
And the really tough games are playing all these juggernauts are on the road.
Yeah, and a lot of tough games early on.
Yeah.
So, you know, besides Green Bay, they host Chicago, which you expect to be a win, you would think, but Chicago's played them tough the last couple of years. At Baltimore, they haven't really had a lot of success against the Ravens, going there especially. home Cleveland, you would expect to be a win. And then at Cincinnati and at Kansas City.
Not easy. Not easy.
So how many playoff or how many of these teams, where I look at it like this, obviously all these teams aren't going to be great, right? Teams get, better and get worse.
Get injuries and things.
Injuries, of course. But how many of these teams in their first 7 games before the bye week expect to be in the playoffs? 6 of the 7 of them expect to be in the playoffs. And so that's their mindset. And then coming after the bye, how many teams that they're playing expect to be in the playoffs? Minnesota, Washington, Philadelphia, the Giants, okay, Green Bay again. Like, all these teams expect to be playoff teams.
Maybe not the Giants.
No, I would say no. The Giants wouldn't be
one of the few games on the schedule. It's win. It is. Correct. It's an incredibly difficult schedule.
It is, and so maybe in theory, something else to think about too. The Lions could be a better team than they were a year ago, but have less wins.
I agree. I think they're definitely going to have less wins.
Yeah, they're not going 15-2 again, but they will have less wins. And then where does that get you? You still would like to host a home playoff game, but obviously, we've seen that doesn't guarantee anything. But where does that get you?
Let's get into it. What both of us look is kind of what their overall season's going to look like, and I'll start off. Like, I think we just talked about it. I think they're going to start off slow. I think the offensive line is going to take some time to gel and get that communication down. I think you're going to see some blitzes get home and Goff get sacked, and you're going to get frustrated. And I think it's going to take time for this offense to get going a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they start off like 3-3, maybe even 3-4 to start the year. And then midseason things start to come together and they really get rolling. They get hot down the stretch. Is that going to be good enough to win the division? We shall see. But I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight in that division all the way across the board. I think all 4 teams are quality teams. There's no easy games within the division. And I wouldn't be surprised if the division winner has 11 wins. Yeah. And I would still pick the Lions to win the division, but I think it's going to be super close. And I think all these division games like we have today are going to be super, super important to try to come away with victories, especially road division games. If you can win road division games, that gives you such a huge advantage within this division. So interesting. What do you think, Brian? What are your predictions for the Lions throughout this season?
For years, I remember, having conversations with friends about the Lions, and I said, what position do they have a player that you would say is the top 5 or top 10 in the league at that position? And for the longest time, you couldn't say that.
It was Barry.
It was Barry, right? Maybe more than, but I'm like, even like the last 10 to 15 years, where would you say? Like, Matt Stafford, Kelvin Johnson. But other than that, when those guys were gone, there was like a period where you're like, there's nowhere. Now, though, with the Lions, their roster is still pretty legit. Right? Like, they have a top 5 running back. They have a top 5 receiver. They have a top 5 offensive lineman, maybe the best in football, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? They have a top 5, you could argue top 5, top 10 tight end. They have a top 3 or 4 defensive rush end, right? There are still
top safeties, Kirby Joseph and Branch.
Yeah, like maybe the best secondary in football. So, like, they still are loaded. And again, we talked about this with the Tigers' perspective, right? And how far they've come. They are still loaded. And maybe it's one of those years where the expectations aren't on them because everybody is expecting them to take a step back. And there is some truth to that where when you don't feel that, you play better. Like, all right, we're going to go prove you wrong then. Like, no, we are still pretty legit. And so I'm with you. I still think they win the division. I think 11 or 12 wins is pretty fair. 11 to 13 wins as a winner is still pretty. I think that'd be pretty accurate. And I feel pretty good about them going into the playoffs. Some of my friends give me a hard time for this. I talked about how I think their window is closed potentially. It's hard. It's hard to get to the Super Bowl. Obviously, it's harder to win the Super Bowl. It's even harder to win. Think of all the great players and great teams that have not gotten there or won. You just mentioned Barry Sanders, Kelvin Johnson never got there. I'm hoping that that let down or giving up that lead at San Francisco doesn't come back to bite them because everything was lined up for them. Everything was lined up. They were healthy. You got a big second half lead.
17-point lead.
It didn't happen. Like, it's some for, and then you never know what happens with injuries and what's going to happen. You never know year to year. So I just hope they're still extremely talented. If they stay healthy, like any team, right? If they stay healthy, their roster is one of the best in the NFC, and they'll be right there come playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, you have mentioned this before. You think the window is closed. I don't know if you necessarily think the window is closed, but maybe you think maybe their best opportunity may have passed them by.
Yeah,
I do agree with that maybe their best opportunity did pass them by. But to say the window is closed, which I've heard other people say as well, both nationally and locally, I think that's crazy because so many of these guys are young or have contracts who have been extended. So one of those guys last night was just Jameson Williams, came through late last night, got a 3-year extension. And that keeps the core group of this offense together for the next 3 to 4 years. So you look at Gibbs has another 3 years on his contract. Goff has been extended. Sewell's been extended. St. Brown's been extended. Laporta's only going into his 3rd year. He's still going to be on his rookie contract. So all these guys are going to be together for 3 to 4 more years. So I think it's crazy to say that the window is closed, but you just hope. And I look back at the Tigers, that 2013 season when they had Boston on the ropes in the NLCS, and you had this incredible team, probably maybe the best roster I've ever seen a Tigers team have. Best pitching staff. And that was your best opportunity. The window didn't necessarily close, which, I mean, I guess it kind of did. But at the time, we didn't think the window was closed. But the best opportunity that team had, that 10-year run, the best opportunity was that team in that moment. And it passed them by. You just hope that San Francisco game doesn't turn out down the road. They'll look back 10 years from now and look back at that game as that core group was incredible, but that was their chance.
Maybe
and it passed them by.
And maybe window closing is too strong because you're right. Like, I just got done talking about how, like last year, the Eagles obviously benefited from the Lions not being healthy, right? You know what I mean? And so who knows what happens this year? Maybe not every team in the NFC is healthy and they're a different team at the end of the year than they are now, and they get banged up, and that window then is back open for the Lions, right? Something happens to Jalen Hurts, unfortunately, or whatever. So you're right, not necessarily close. You just mentioned a lot of guys that re-sign and are going to be here for a while. I'm not a Jared Goff hater. I just think that position is so important that it's rare. It's happened. It's definitely happened, obviously, where you don't have elite quarterbacks win you Super Bowls. Think of Brad Johnson, Tampa Bay, Trent Dilfer, Baltimore. But I'm telling you, that is rare. And those were special defenses. They had special guys around them. Goff needs to play like a top 3 to 5 quarterback, in my opinion, for them to break through. He just does.
And again, I mean, I think Goff, when everything is perfect, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Like if you listed the quarterbacks and say, hey, everything around you, the protection, your receivers, everything's going to be perfect. How good is he? How good is he when everything around him is what you need?
So
I would put him in the top tier. But when things break down just a little bit break down, a receiver drops some passes, guy runs the wrong route, or most importantly, the protection breaks down. He might be one of the worst, honestly.
How's this for? This is like kind of revisionist history. Lions, Commanders last year in the playoffs. Matthew Stafford's a quarterback for the Lions. Who wins?
I don't think the offense was as big of an issue. The turnovers were an issue.
Let's try that again. If Matthew Stafford,
I think they still lose. I think they still lose because I think the bigger issue is defense.
If Matthew Stafford is the quarterback against the 49ers 2 years ago.
No, that's a different story. Yeah, they win.
So does Matthew Stafford turn the ball? Like, because in his career, he won games by himself.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
He could do it. He came those comebacks against Cleveland, against Dallas, at home. And I wonder, defense or not, but those turnovers.
Just come back in the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati.
Super Bowl, but those turnovers.
The final drive.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but like when you play that position, it's the most important position in sports. Things are magnified. They just are. Like, you can't have that can't happen in the playoffs. And
yeah, just final thing I'll say about about the Lions and where they're headed this season, and then we'll finish off giving our predictions for today's game. But I just think you look at Goff, and obviously I talked about the interior offensive line being an issue. If that holds up, if that does, guys end up performing. Right, Litch plays really well. Maybe Glasgow was hurt last year, and he's healthy this year and plays well. And Mahogany is everything that we saw at the end of the season last year, and he becomes a really good guard for years to come. Like, you look at what Goff has around him from a skill position, I think it's the best in the league. Like, you have Jameson Williams, you have St. Brown, you have Laporta, you have this third-round rookie in Tesla who looks absolutely incredible in preseason, and everything you heard in camp, like he just tore it up. And in the backfield, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, who might be the best running back in football, one of the best running backs in football, definitely one of the most explosive backs in all of football. And then you combine that with Montgomery, who's an absolute bowling ball, who can get you all those tough yards and short yardage situations when you need it. I mean, you cannot ask as a quarterback and as an offense to have more weapons around you than what Goff's going to have. But it's just going to come down to, can he get the protection that he needs from that offensive line, and a lot of questions at the center and guard positions.
So what is your, Dan, then tell me, let's give a record or let's give a prediction for today. I'll go first since this is more your show. I'll take the lead here. I say, we can be pretty critical. And again, we talk about how expectations change for everybody and perspective change. The Lions are still the best. They have the best roster in the division. They still arguably have the top 2 or 3 rosters in all of football. I think right now they're healthy. I do think they are motivated and right. They're embarrassed. You can't downplay that at all for professionals. I do think the Lions go into Green Bay and win today. I do. Score, I'll say 31-20. I think it's that type of game. I still don't think Jordan Love is an elite. Like we talk about Goff, but Jordan Love isn't an elite top 10 quarterback by any means. I think he's really good and could be, but I do think the Lions are better than the Packers, and I think the Lions get to 12 wins this year. I think it'll be 12-5, and I think that's good enough to host a home playoff game. And then after that, you let the chips fall where they may. Yeah. But I'm saying they beat the Packers today 31-20, and I think they finish 12-5.
So Green Bay, everybody's starting to be kind of the shrewd pick to win the division now all of a sudden. The odds are slightly in their favor. The betting odds are slightly in favor of the Packers to win the division. I think that's crazy. I think it's crazy. There's a lot of people just saying, well, they got Micah Parsons. This is going to change everything. You got this incredible pass rusher. But if you look just head-to-head with Green Bay and Detroit, what is Green Bay's problem when they face the Lions? They can't stop their run. Like the Lions run the ball all over them, hold the ball, time of possession, and they just pound the ball with Gibbs and Montgomery. It's what they did last year when they went into Lambeau and won that game and really kind of controlled that game. They did it with the run game. And to trade your best run defender in Clark to get Parsons, obviously along with 2 first-round picks, but a lot of the less talked about Clark is he's one of the better run defender defensive tackles in the league. And Dan Campbell actually talked about it. He's like, well, that was the first thing I saw. He's not in the lineup now. So this is the guy we don't have to worry about anymore. Because he's huge. He's a huge part of Green Bay's rush defense. And to take him out, yes, you add Micah Parsons. He's an incredible player. Might be one of the best players, defensive players in the league. But his goal is to rush the passer. And if the Lions are controlling the ball, running the football, and it becomes made easier now with one of the Green Bay's best rush defenders out, I think it's a situation where a head-to-head matchup, it might actually push the Lions a little bit more in a better favor. In just the head-to-head. Now, in the overall, I think Green Bay probably wins more games having Parsons. But just the head-to-head matchup, and you just look at the X's and O's of it, I think it benefits the Lions, and I think you're going to see that come through today. I think the Lions are going to absolutely dominate with the run game. I think Gibbs is going to go off. I think he might break 1 or 2. And you're going to see when it comes down to crunch time, Montgomery really pound the football and control that clock and close things out in that 4-minute offense down the stretch. I'm going to say Lions 28, Packers 20. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be close, but I think the Lions are kind of going to control it throughout and really show off their run game and show that they are still one of the best teams in the league and the best team in this division. And I got the Lions winning 28-20.
Excellent. And again, how cool is it that we're that confident in our sports teams right now, where, again, so many years we're not even having this conversation. We're debating whether or not their quarterback is a top 5, top 10 quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, that's just wild. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun day, a great day. Tigers play the White Sox later. Hopefully win that series. Going to go clinch the division soon. Magic numbers getting close to 10. Lions start 1-0. Let's go. It's a great time of year.
So that will wrap it up for us. For Brian, I'm Dan Murphy. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for Buffalo Wild Wings here in Waterford for hosting us. We hope you have a great day, and go Lions.